Well, Cape Town has been one of the centers of protest since the most recent conflict between Israel and Palestine broke out in October of 2023. And as preparations are underway to implement the ceasefire in Gaza, we speak to residents to gather their views on the 15-month-long hostilities, which have claimed tens of thousands of lives. And our reporter Vanessa Poonah, as well as video journalist Andrew Bennett, are at the promenade at Sea Point, where we understand chaos previously broke out during skirmishes between groupings in support of Israel and those pledging solidarity with Palestine. Vanessa, a very good afternoon to you. So take us through exactly what led to chaos between those groups in support and those against Israel, and how is the situation now?
Alicia, good afternoon to you. And yes, indeed, since the war and hostilities broke out in October 2023, what we have seen is that Cape Town had become a sort of hotbed for mostly peaceful protests. We've seen numerous pro-Palestinian protests happening in and around Cape Town. We know that there's been, for example, weekly vigils at or on the steps of the St. George's Cathedral. And then also recently we've seen in December last year, marking Holocaust Day, we've seen a protest outside the Holocaust Centre in Cape Town. But of course, the promenade, this is a space here in Sea Point, just adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, where families generally come out to enjoy picnics, walks, strolls, and just general recreation. But of course, in November 2023, what we saw happening here was a grouping, a church grouping that had planned to come together to have a prayer service for the release of hostages, as well as praying for the situation that had started unfolding in Gaza at that time. What we then saw was a large number of pro-Palestinian supporters disrupting those activities. We saw police coming in, Metro Police having to break up the skirmishes which took place, of course, marring what usually are peaceful protests when it comes to the Palestinian issue. Of course, we've spoken to quite a number of Capetonians and visitors. They've not wanted to stick around for us to do a live interview with them because, of course, as I've said, people are jogging and walking and so on. But we spoke to a gentleman, Nazar Lehman, and he was saying that at this stage it's still, for him, unclear whether indeed this truce will be lasting. He told us that his heart had been breaking for the Palestinian people, not just over this last 15 months, but also the decades preceding the Hamas attacks in Israel, saying that what needs to happen immediately is the rebuilding of schools, hospitals, and for that humanitarian aid that you mentioned there just now to start filtering in to the people of Gaza. Also, I spoke to a gentleman, Dennis Knox from Canada, and he was saying basically also that at this stage it does bode as a promising step in what has been a bloody conflict, but also saying that it could be a start to a more lasting peace. That, of course, if all the parties agree to sit around the table and develop whether it is a two-state solution or whether it is one state, people coming together to understand that humankind needs to live in peace and harmony. Of course, we've had some people not quite sure whether to share their views on this platform, but saying they do have their own views with regards to the conflict in the Middle East. Indeed, they, Alicia, telling us that they'd rather keep that to themselves. So I think at this moment, there's a lot of apprehension, and people are really hoping to see what this truce, this first phase of the truce, will indeed deliver before we can see, the next few months and weeks rolling by, whether indeed all parties are committed to make sure that the guns and the gunfire does indeed get silenced in Gaza.
And of course, Vanessa, the DA, the provincial government, has long been a public ally and supporter of Israel. Have they made any public statements since the ceasefire deal was actually made public?
Alicia, I have not seen a statement from the Democratic Alliance. As a matter of fact, we are going to be checking up on various political parties also for their views. But of course, I haven't seen any such statement. I do know that for the longest time, we have heard that the parties involved, and I think very few parties would have wanted a conflict, a prolonged conflict like the one we have been seeing to continue. Of course, we'll speak to all those role players. Our sense today was to hear from people on the ground around ordinary South Africans, ordinary Capetonians, what their views were, because we've seen that Cape Town Town has had a number of these protests, and let me just bring it back to you. For example, all over Cape Town, if I can mention this, what we've seen happening over the past year and a half or so, Alicia, is that there have been murals springing up on the sides of buildings, on houses, pro-Palestinian murals, and that, of course, was in support of the Palestinian cause, calling for, among others, a ceasefire. And if I talk about a ceasefire, that has been, for example, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign's main call since this conflict broke out, is that there can be peace without the weapons being put down. So I suppose that from their point of view, this would be welcome. But I think on the ground, the majority of people we've been speaking to are cautiously optimistic at this stage.
And speaking of those, of course, campaigns, Vanessa, that we've seen in the past 15 months of this conflict, various groups there staging protests, holding dialogue, and also calling for an end to what is currently happening in Palestine. Are there people gathering on the ground at this moment besides those that were actually involved in that skirmish earlier on?
Alicia, as a matter of fact, no. And we were expecting to see groups of people coming together to mark this day, because I've just said that Cape Town has been sort of the center of these gatherings, the pro-Palestinian gatherings and so on. And also, we did expect to see at least people coming out, but I suppose people are just enjoying the Sunday afternoon. I must also reiterate, Alicia, that that incident was not the norm, because what we've normally seen was even a protest in the center of Cape Town where tens and tens, or rather thousands of people attended. Most of these protests did occur peacefully. That one incident that we're talking about in November 2023, that was indeed something that was out of the ordinary when we saw those clashes taking place. That wasn't the hallmark of the kind of protest action we have seen in Cape Town. But yes, it has been the center, the city has been the center of people gathering with strong views around the issues in the Middle East, and specifically the conflict between Palestine and Israel, and the situation in Gaza.
And generally, how much of interest, is it to the people of Cape Town, to the residents, Vanessa, what is currently happening in Gaza? Of course, I know a lot of people had a vested interest in terms of coming to a swift resolution pertaining to the hostilities between Israel and Gaza.
You would know that there is a massive support, a massive pro-Palestinian support in Cape Town, and also there is support, Israeli support in Cape Town. But I can tell you that what we've seen unfolding over the past couple of months, we've seen people having meetings, public meetings, we've seen gatherings, prayer gatherings. We've seen even the Palestinian soccer team at one stage visiting Cape Town, having a match, I think it was at the Cape Town or Athlone Stadium. I stand to be corrected at this point in time. But yes, there has been an outpouring, and I think besides the issue of whether people are on one or on either side of the divide, if one can call it that, I think the general sense that I'm getting, and the general sense that we've heard over the past while, is that people want peace, and people want the guns to be silenced, the bombs to be silenced. A short while ago, I spoke to a lady, Rabia, and she was telling me, of course, couldn't speak too loudly because of an issue with the voice, but she was saying that it's God's will that people come together, that people live in peace. She was saying that at the end of the day, everybody are united and should be united, and saying that this truce is welcomed, the ceasefire is welcomed, and hoping and praying that indeed it will be a lasting issue, as well as a beginning to a lasting resolution of what we've seen taking place over decades in the Middle East.
Absolutely. And we've seen also, Vanessa, in that particular city, fundraisings. I mean, funds were raised towards the people of Palestine. There were events that were marked to remember the slain journalists in particular that have actually since perished during the start of the hostilities in Gaza.
Yes, indeed. It's been a very difficult time, and I think more so for the people who actually had to endure the violence taking place there. But even people in Cape Town, residents of Cape Town, have expressed to us, as well as to other media outlets, and I mean, we've seen on social media, has been a wash and a flood with sentiments around the Gaza issue. Yes, there have been fundraising efforts, people have been collecting, and I think the biggest source of their worry and concern was the fact that for many months it was a big challenge to get humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. We've spoken to the aid organization, for example, the Gift of the Givers, on numerous occasions around the Gaza issue. They've lost people in that conflict, but they've also told us at some stages how difficult it was for them to get their trucks of humanitarian aid, food, clothing, medicine specifically into that territory, telling us how long, sometimes for days, weeks, vehicles and trucks couldn't get in to the Rafah border or across the Rafah border. So, of course, yes, there was a concerted effort to get as much humanitarian help as possible into that area, specifically with people having been injured, people not having access to life-saving medications, much-needed surgeries, with the bombings of hospitals. The main concern was to make sure that people have fresh water, food, as well as medical supplies. And of course, with the ceasefire coming into effect today, I think that is a major concern and major focus also for all these relief agencies, Alicia, is to get those much needed and urgent humanitarian supplies into Gaza to make sure that people can firstly be assisted in that way. And of course, families will be wanting to make their way to areas where they've been evacuated from to meet with loved ones. But of course, yes, we'll keep a close watch on developments as a world, I think, over the next few days and weeks to see whether the situation in Gaza indeed does improve. And of course, we've seen millions and millions of rands of damage. I mean, the entire Gaza area almost flattened over this past few months. And of course, another focus area will be the rebuilding so that hospitals and schools and homes and lives can be rebuilt.